Planning a trip to Iceland can take long hours, even days of researching, building your itinerary and booking the right accommodation. And I know that very well because I've done it so many times while helping plan trips for my clients. But what if you could visit Iceland without doing any of that? What if you could just book a flight, point at the map and simply wing it? And so in this video I just want to talk about the options that you have and whether that's actually something that you should consider or if it's just going to lead to a disaster. Let's go over the options when it comes to the transportation, accommodation and realistic plans depending on how long you are staying. And just to give you a quick heads up, this isn't going to be a hitchhiking dirtbag guide to Iceland, Even though I have hitchhiked here so many times during my first years of living here, I quickly learned that this isn't the most practical way to travel here. The distances are long, traffic here is low in many areas, and unless you want to spend most of your time waiting on the side of the road and miss like 90% of the country, it's really not ideal. And so renting a car is actually a necessary investment, mostly because of the freedom that it gives you. And the same goes for the public transportation. Unfortunately, Iceland is one of the worst places to rely on it. And yes, we do have public buses, but they only run between towns and they don't really stop at any of the waterfalls or any other attractions, any other main attractions along the way. Now, one of the easiest ways to visit Iceland without doing much planning is to simply book a multi-day bus tour. There are a few companies offering this and it's a great solution for people who don't have a driving license or those who just don't want to deal with planning anything besides getting here. But honestly, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this unless you are, for example, paying a premium for something like a small group privately guided adventure. Because here's the thing, you see, in most cases, these tours only take you to the big highlights, and while that might sound good at first, these are also one of the most crowded places in the country. And that means that you won't have a flexibility to stop at the smaller, less known places, the hidden gems, which in my opinion are the best part of being in Iceland. Which brings me to one of my favorite ways to explore Iceland without any real plans. Something that gives you flexibility, lets you hit the road and then figure out where you'll sleep later that day depending on where you end up. And that's renting a car and camping. This is honestly the perfect solution for anyone who wants to travel around Iceland in a more spontaneous way. And unless you are going to a very specific place like Landmannalaugar for example, or a few campsites near the busiest areas, in most cases you don't need to book any campsite ahead of time and you can just show up. And here you've got basically three options. The first one is renting a camper van, RV, car with a rooftop tent, or a regular car or SUV converted into a camper. The second is renting a normal car or SUV and either bringing or renting a tent and sleeping bags. This is obviously less comfortable but also cheaper. And honestly it's still way better than, sleeping in a car that's not camper ready, and that's something that I definitely wouldn't recommend. But what if you don't want to camp, or you maybe just want to mix it up by booking a, regular accommodation for some nights? Can you still wing it, or will you struggle to find places last minute? And well, it depends. The thing is, you can almost always find a place to stay in winter and during the shoulder season, but in the peak season between June and August, it is still possible, but you just need to keep in mind that you will need to expect, higher prices and fewer options, especially in the busiest areas of South Iceland. But you know what, let's just create a real life scenario and let's just say that you are, for example, leaving Reykjavik and then you are visiting some of the most popular spots around the Golden Circle, and then, for example, you decide that you'll head towards Wick and probably stay somewhere in that area. And so let's just check what we can find last minute for tonight, which is June 14th, and let's say for 2 people. And yeah, as you can see, even though there aren't a ton of options, you can still find something. Some places will be expensive, but there are usually at least a few that are more on the budget-friendly side too. Now real quick, do you want to know another reason why traveling around Iceland without any concrete plan at all can actually be a great idea? You see, what happens here quite often, for example, is that one side of the island can be completely wrapped in clouds and rain for days, while the other has much better weather. And so if your trip is planned down to the hour with accommodations and tours booked in advance, then it is really hard to adjust without, losing any money. But if you're winging it and booking things last minute, you can just pack your stuff and drive to the sunny side of the country, instead of being stuck in the rain for half of your trip. That said, it still makes sense to have at least some kind of plan, and you should at least know the basics, like which part of Iceland you'd like to ideally visit, or what's realistic given the time that you have. For example, in my opinion, it is really not ideal to be driving around the entire island if you only have like 5 or 6 days. Honestly, in these situations like that, it just makes way more sense to pick 1 or 2 regions and then focus on exploring those areas properly. And also, you should know things like that you won't be able to drive into places like, for example, Highlands if you have booked a 2-wheel drive car. And to help you get started with planning and inspiration, check the link below. You will find my Iceland map and a few other useful resources. And honestly, that's how I travel most of the time here in Iceland. I simply check the weather, hit the road, and then just figure out where I'm going to sleep later in the day. It basically just adds some sense of adventure and usually leads to some fun memories too. But realistically, this kind of travel won't work for everyone here. And for many people, it's probably way better to have their trip planned from start to finish. That way you know exactly where you are staying and how much you are spending, and that you are not missing out on anything. To give you an example, if my parents ask me to plan that trip for them here in Iceland, then I definitely wouldn't say, just wing it. I want them to have a proper itinerary, with confirmed places to stay and a clear plan of what they are doing each day. But if you are young, well-traveled, or just up for an adventure, then this could be a really fun way to experience Iceland. So I hope that this inspired you, or maybe at least confirmed something that you were already thinking about. And if you found this video helpful, then make sure to check out this video next too, and I'll see you there.